They started with over 660-some thousand. Now, one of the biggest, hardest hit areas are those customers that belong to or are serviced by the Washington Electric Co-op down in Washington County. I don't know if that happens to be any of you folks or not, but AEP owns the distribution system for most of the small co-ops. They don't own the power generation, but the distribution part of it they do. And I'm hearing from AEP that there have been miles and miles. One stretch, they've got 10 miles of totally destroyed electric lines and poles. I mean, they just aren't there anymore. They're completely destroyed. I heard over when was it? I guess it was Monday. They were talking about having to shut down parts of Interstate 70 because they were going to be rerouting and doing some pretty major work to reroute some of the AEP distribution lines. So that's what I know right now. You know, the governor requested and the president granted emergency status on Saturday, last Saturday, and there began the flow of federal support. Federal support came in the way of water, came in the way of generators. Now, from what I understand, does anybody here work with the Emergency Action Center from Athens County? Okay. From what I understand, the generators that FEMA is distributing are designed or are targeted for, like the emergency operations centers, the cooling stations, facilities where life and death is an issue. So FEMA is not, as far as I know, not distributing generators to individuals, but there are generators to buy, and companies are trying to make sure that those generators are made available to folks. But I would like to know here today, if you've got any specific needs here in your area, we need to make sure that your Emergency Action Center knows about those needs specifically. Because I've been in contact with the governor's office and the governor's team. They have, every time I've called them, they have been very responsive. I don't know what the local experience has been, but every time I've called them, they've been very responsive. We've done things like had water delivered, had dumpsters, you know, as people began to see spoilage of their food, nowhere for it to go. It creates a bit of a health hazard to stay stacked up in the house. So wanted a place for people to go take their garbage, because in some places the garbage trucks could not even run because their facilities were not operating because they were out of power. So some of those kinds of things. One of the biggest issues that we had to resolve was down in Belpre. We had a lot of folks that were without communication. They had no landlines, they had no cell phones. The businesses were also without power and communication, and patients that required oxygen. You had patients that needed to get oxygen, but they couldn't get a hold of their health care providers to let them know. The health care providers couldn't get a hold of them to check on them. And in some cases, the trees were down across the roads and all those kinds of things. So it was a real problem. And the state jumped on that too. So if you have any specific needs, I'll be glad to try and be a conduit and relay those back, not only to your county emergency management agency, but also to the state folks when I leave here this afternoon. So if you have any of those, make sure we know about those before we leave. With that, let me open it up and see if you guys have got any questions about the storm or about anything else that we might be doing. Charles.
I just want to add one thing. My wife works at Marietta Memorial, and they were taking anybody in that needed any treatments or oxygen. They weren't putting them in the systems, they weren't charging them. They had respiratory therapists going down and doing treatments. They needed oxygen, but they were more than willing to let
That's
them
good to
in
know.
and help with that.
I worked at the Emergency Operations Center in Washington County on Sunday, and I began to call around to check with the other counties to find out where the biggest problems were. I toured some of the hardest hit areas. Right up the road in Guernsey County in Cambridge. I don't know if you've been up there or not. They've got one block downtown that looks like a bomb went off. I was in a mobile home that got hit by a tornado in 1974. So I know what a tornado can do. I've seen one from the inside, and they are not pretty. And that was not a fun ride. Thank God that we survived. My roommate was hurt pretty bad, but we both survived. But I can tell you that block downtown in Cambridge, a church, the Presbyterian church, looks like somebody set a bomb off in it. I mean, the whole church is leveled, nothing standing but the front stone entryway. It jumped over the Catholic church. I don't know what that says, but you know. But it jumped over the Catholic church, hit a business called Buckeye Tire Company, tore their roof completely off, put their roof on, picked it up and slammed it down on top of a Napa auto parts store, and you can see the 2x6s and the 2x4s went through the roof of the Napa auto place like a spear, and completely dismantled their roof, and it did some other damage as well. The chief of police there said, Bill, he said, you know, we're just glad that this is where it hit. He said, right now we're dealing with water outages and power outages. He said 1 block over, 2 blocks over, we'd be setting up a morgue in the hospital instead of worrying about rebuilding buildings and contacting the insurance company. So, to my knowledge, there have been 2 deaths that are storm related. One of them was in Muskingum County. A farmer and his wife tried to take shelter in a barn. The barn collapsed. The farmer's wife was killed. And then a gentleman, not directly related to the storm, but indirectly related, was out riding a 4-wheeler trying to survey the damage around his place, and ran into a tree that had fallen across the road that he was riding on, and he was killed. At least that's what the report that I had heard. So we got more people coming in. Pete Coladas says, hey Pete. Yeah, that's you. Come on in. So that's what I know. Yes, ma'am.
I was in Belfry today, and as I was leaving Belfry, on this end of Belfry at Bob's Market, there was a sign on the door of free water. I think it would be drinking water.
Yeah.
If anybody's needs that.
Yeah. Belfry had some issues when I contacted them on Monday morning. They still did not have many of the basic necessities they needed, and I connected them with the sheriff and relayed some information to the state officials for them, and they began to get materials flowing.